All right, this is about where we were cut off yesterday, so I'm going to continue here, and this is where it gets to some really good stuff. So I believe this is his second principle of reading, so definitely something you want to highlight. Do not attempt to improve your neighbor or your neighborhood by what or how you read. Self-improvement is a large enough project for your mind and spirit. There are no ethics of reading. So here he's kind of sounding like Emerson, again, when we're talking about the self. Why do you read? You read for yourself. You read to come to know yourself, to understand what is human in you, and that is enough. You don't have to try to read to fix the world. But don't worry, because you're not being selfish, and he'll go on here to say, he will go on to say, this is really good here, this is pretty cool. Read, therefore, by the inner light that John Milton. John Milton is another guy that we respect a lot. He was a poet. He wrote something called Paradise Lost. And probably don't really need to know this, but he's a very, very famous English poet. Historicist is kind of read, therefore, by the inner light that John Milton celebrated. So here we have ethos again, by the way. You know, this is him saying, hey, look at this really respected guy. This is what he thought. We should think the same way, which is probably something that Emerson would disagree with, but, you know, not everybody has to believe the same things. By the inner light that John Milton celebrated and that Emerson took as a principle of reading, which can be our third, a scholar is a candle which the love and desire of all men will light. You need not fear that the freedom of your development as a reader is selfish, because if you become an authentic reader, then the response to your labors will confirm you as an illumination to others. So this is like, the more you know, the more you understand, the bigger your world. That's a way that I would phrase it, is that reading makes your world bigger. The better you will be able to help others. You'll be able to illuminate others, to show them the way. So that's pretty cool. Okay. You know, if you are better, you can help others. And really help or show others. So don't be afraid to be selfish in your reading, is what he's saying. Okay. Moving on. The largely forgotten function of a university education is caught forever in Emerson's address, The American Scholar, when he says of a scholar's duty, they must be comprised in self-trust. Here we are. So the thing about reading is it's just you and the words and the meaning that you make from it. I take from Emerson also my fourth principle of reading: one must be an inventor to read well. This idea of self-trust is another big nugget that I'm going to... So, you know, sometimes I highlight, sometimes I put boxes around things. I'm going to highlight this because it's one of our principles. One must be an inventor to read well. Creative reading, in Emerson's sense, I once named as misreading, blah, blah, blah. The ruin or blank that they see when they look at a poem is in their own eye. So this is kind of what I was getting at yesterday when I'm talking about if you find something boring, well, it's your job to construct the meaning. So what you're really talking about is your own ability to construct meaning from something, a lot of times. Now, there are things that are authentically boring, too. Self-trust is not an endowment, okay? Self-trust, this idea that you can trust your own opinion and your own understanding, is not an endowment. An endowment is something that is just given to you, but is the second birth of the mind, which cannot come without years of deep reading. Wow, the second birth of the mind. It's a big deal. It's like you're born with one mind, the other one you have to build. And according to Bloom, you build that mind through reading. Why? Because reading is like such a solitary activity, and it's a journey that you're on by yourself. It's a very heroic understanding. There are no absolute standards for the aesthetic. The aesthetic has to do with what is beautiful and what is worthy. So aesthetic is it's a good word to know. Worthy, beautiful. If you wish to maintain that Shakespeare's ascendancy was a product of colonialism, then who will bother to confute you? Shakespeare, after 4 centuries, is more pervasive than ever he was before. They will perform him in outer space. I love that sentence right there. Okay, so what he's talking about here is, again, he's saying that just reading history, just seeing history and literature is limiting. Because Shakespeare is good because he gets at the universal. They will perform him in outer space and on other worlds if those worlds are reached. Did Harold Bloom like Shakespeare? Yeah. He is not a conspiracy of Western culture. He contains every principle of reading, and he is my touchstone throughout this book. Borges, so he mentions a lot of people. Borges is an awesome, I believe he's an Argentinian writer who wrote in Spanish. He wrote some crazy stories. Since ideology, particularly in its shower version, so ideology, these are like, this is like, ideology is that tough word. We've talked about it a little bit. It has something to do with politics. But really, ideology, he's talking about ideology as kind of a filter. It's like you view the whole world, and you probably know people like this, and maybe you do it yourself. But if you think about the Republican and the Democrat, the liberal and conservative positions on the issues, it's like they can't see the other side because because everything that they see and everything that happens comes through the filter of ideology. It's a really big idea for 9th graders to get a hold of. So good luck with that. Since ideology, particularly in its shallower version, so here is Bloom letting us know that not all ideologies are equal. You could say a shallow ideology, or you could say you could have an ideology that's a little deeper, is particularly destructive to the capacity to apprehend and appreciate irony. All right, so here's a big concept. I suggest that the recovery of the ironic might be our 5th principle. And this is the most difficult section of this text. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what irony is. Irony is another big idea. So these are 2 huge ideas in this paragraph. Ideology and irony. And if you have a handle on either or both of these as a 9th grader, you should feel very good about yourself, because not very many 9th graders are here yet. Irony, its simplest version the simplest thing I can say is that it's what happens when what is expected, I'm going to put it in quotes, what's expected conflicts with reality. That's the simplest way that I can say it. And it has a lot to do with getting things and understanding things and whether or not things are funny. When you read the Jumping Frog of Calaveras County and you didn't find it funny and you found it boring, it was because you did not appreciate the irony. You didn't get the irony. And the irony is like what the reader expects. What the reader expects. All right? Sometimes it's what a character expects in a story. All right? In the Calaveras County, it was both of them, because the reader expects the storyteller to tell the story. And we talked about how the narrator abandoned the reader and kind of like left you alone with that crazy other storyteller. And that's not what you expect. And so there's irony, and irony is usually funny. Sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's powerful. And I'm going to explain in another video. I'm going to read that David Foster Wallace story. Okay? It's like a essay, really, about going on that cruise. And that piece of writing is very, very, relies on irony a lot, because he's talking about being on a luxury cruise, but the essay is really about fear and despair. So it's not what you expect, and he explores that to a deep level. So that's a that's a big, big, tough concept, and I'll talk about that more in another video. But let's move on. So I'm going to skip all this stuff right here, because what he's doing is he's trying to explain irony, and you could read that a couple times and still not get it, and that's okay. So I'm skipping that little section, and I'll find out what else is important. He's going on about irony. Irony demands a certain attention span. So here, and some of you have read this far, irony demands a certain attention span and the ability to sustain antithetical ideas. Those are two ideas that are opposite. It's so huge, even when they collide with one another. All right? Everything is not always as it seems. Is it possible to hold two opposite ideas in your mind at the same time? It makes you feel kind of uncomfortable. Strip irony away from reading, and it loses at once all discipline and all surprise. For now, what comes near to you that can be used for weighing and considering, it is very likely will be irony, even if many of your teachers will not know what it is and where it is to be found. Irony will clear your mind of the cant of ideologues. Wow. And help you blaze forth as the scholar of one candle. That's just awesome, right? There's a lot of, he believes in you. Harold Ballou believes in you. And we believe in you too. But it's a hard thing that we're asking. All right, so finishing out, I'm going to maybe just go over this last little bit here. The sublime is like the next level. It's like the ultimate level. The ultimate level is the sublime. Things that are perfect. The only secular transcendence. So secular means like outside of church and religion. There is a reader's sublime, and it seems the only secular transcendence we can ever attain, except for the even more precarious transcendent. Precarious means dangerous. Precarious transcendence we call falling in love. I urge you to find what truly comes near to you that can be used for weighing and considering. Read deeply, not to believe, not to accept, not to contradict, but to learn to share in that one nature, that human nature, to share that human nature that reads and writes. Good stuff.